Try to go live on StreamYard. Instagram, are we good to go here? I'm going to wave at some of you guys. Let me know. I'm trying something a little new today. We got multiple cameras. Hi, Amy Stevenson. So good to see you. And I think we are live here, which is the StreamYard world, which I think this week is LinkedIn, YouTube, and now Facebook. Golly, I haven't been Facebook in a while. But I think about that, and I initially built my first business on Facebook in 2007. We're waiting on LinkedIn from Jorge, but I'm going to start talking anyway because we got people on here. I remember when I was living in New York City as a struggling actor in 2007, trying to build a health and fitness business in the network marketing space. Hi, Amy. Oh yeah, we're good. Let it rip. He says, let it rip. We're good. So I was trying to build my first business in the health and fitness space in 2007. I remember being told that's kind of right about the time Facebook went public to everybody. So I missed, I'm just old enough I missed when Facebook was just for college kids. I watched The Social Network like every year. It's one of my favorite movies. And it's always like, oh, I missed that part. I kind of missed that time when it was this exclusive thing for colleges as well. But I remember back in those days, I was told, hey, this is a body-to-body business. Like you need to, get people in rooms and have meetups and have meetings. And I was trying to do that in New York City and nobody would show up. Nobody was showing up. I would rent out dance spaces at Ripley Greer where there'd be a lot of auditions and musical auditions and stuff. And I would haul all my supplements and workout stuff. And I'd try to invite all my performing friends and say, hey, I think I found a way for us to make some extra money because, every performer in New York City is usually auditioning and working some temp job and waiting tables, and people wouldn't show up. But here's a funny little tidbit is one of the only people that show up, one of my best friends, Jet Thomason, and we went to OU together, he would show up. And I would do my presentation anyway. I was sharing this on a podcast the other day because I find when I work with clients and help them in their speaking skills and their storytelling skills and their public speaking skills, a lot of things what a lot of coaches do is they'll help you write a talk. They'll help you get clear on your message. But you need a safe place to get in reps, right? You need a safe place to be bad before you're good. And in those moments, it would have been real easy for me to pack up my stuff and go home, but I would still do my presentation because I treated it the way I would treat an acting class. Because in an acting class, the brilliant thing about an acting class is it's a safe place to fail, right? It's a safe place to try some things, to mess up, because you're not trying to audition right then. You're not trying to get a job. You're not in front of your ideal audience at the time. It's a place for reps, for a safe space. And literally trying to build that business in was the same thing. And people look at me now and say, hey, Jimmy, you have great presentation skills, or you're really good at public speaking. And I was like, well, I wasn't always. I used to be 100-pound overweight, 3-time college dropout. And I literally used to have this physical shake when I would be in front of people. And it took reps. It took reps to become comfortable in front of an audience. It took reps it looks second nature. I tell people I still get nervous when I get on a stage because it matters to me, right? It matters to me. It's like I put a lot of thought into before I jumped on here today. It's like, okay, how can I best serve the audience? If there's people that are giving me their time today on a Friday afternoon, I want to make it worth their while. Right. And so going back to how I built on Facebook, I was working on a TV show. My dear friend, Michael Urie, who just got his own caricature at Sardi's. If you don't know Sardi's, it's like a very famous restaurant in New York City where they have all the pictures and caricatures of actors and famous people and musicians all over you've probably seen it in movies. And I'm so proud of him. He got a caricature at Sardi's yesterday. And so he's, if you're watching Apple TV, if you're watching Shrinking right now, season 2 is out. He is on that. At the time, he was doing a TV show called Ugly Betty, if you remember that. I think it was on NBC. And he helped me get a gig there. It's how I got my SAG card. When they moved Ugly Betty from LA to New York City, he asked if I wanted a job. And of course I did. But when you work on a TV show, there is a lot of hurry up and wait. And so a lot of time in the green room when they're moving, they're moving lights around and just, there's all sorts of things that get delayed. And that's when I started futzing around on Facebook, trying to futz around on Facebook and figure out if I could build this business where people weren't showing up live, but would they show up? Could I connect with people online? Could I help people? And I had a mentor a long time ago that said, we're only looking for the people that are looking for us. And that goes for you too. Whatever you're in, your business, is at the end of the day, when we try to talk to everybody, we really are talking to no one. Our job as presenters, our jobs as public speakers is to craft things in such a way that we filter out the people really quickly that aren't interested at all, because nobody wants to convince. I've been in that business before. You're trying to convince or, help people. I want to be able to paint a picture and tell a story that the person listening gets just as excited as about the opportunity as I am about presenting it, right? And those people who are just looking for me. And one of the things that comes up a lot is sometimes we struggle at handling objections, right? Handling objections, I feel like, for any business it can be one of the biggest bugaboos. Even inside a corporate structure, let's say you oversee a team culture. You have a team that you're working with. There's a new project. Sometimes overcoming an objection is just an objection that they're not willing to look at things a new way. An objection may be not willing to adjust an attitude. Maybe it's been a bad attitude. Maybe there's a bad culture inside of that business as well. And the objection you're trying to overcome is that attitude, is that lack of enthusiasm. Maybe it is one-on-one in a relationship or a work relationship. And the objection you're trying to overcome is the conflict. And what I have found is the fastest way to overcome an objection is with a story. It really, truly is. And I'm going to give you a few examples today of ways you can do that. First and foremost, people can argue with, I say facts, right? If they're like, we all have those friends that are, I'm such an emotional decision maker, right? I don't bog down in minutia. I don't bog down in all the fine print details of things. My buddy Dave Ward, on the other hand, he's the other side of that, right? He is the details guy. He was a lawyer, of course. Like, that's his job. That's why he's really good at that. I have probably dipped my toe into more things that I would have avoided the problem had I had that skill set. But what I used to get frustrated with is people that wanted to bog down and just ask me every question in the world before they would make a decision. And one of my early mentors taught me a technique, and we have a friend of ours, Mike Ryan, we were just talking about this the other day, Dave, who did such a great job of what he did is he was a collector of stories. And so what one of my early mentors used to say is that when people would say something about, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, I'm skeptical. Is this a scam? Blah, 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 blah. The way she would teach to respond is, I don't know about that. All I know is, and then would tell a story. For example, if our buddy Mike, he was talking to somebody who's trying to help them get started in a home business, like a side hustle. And they'd be like, oh, I'm a nurse. I work the night shift and I just don't have time for that. Mike was so good at just going, you know what? I don't know about that. All I know is Sally is somebody that I've worked with, and Sally's a nurse. And he would just tell Sally's story. Because people can argue all day long with you about the ins and outs and the minutiae. The minute you go down that rabbit hole with them, you're just both going to end up rolling in the mud, right? You're both going to get stuck down there, and you have just tried to get yourself in the convincing business. And so often that it just doesn't bear much fruit. It really doesn't bear much fruit the minute you're trying to convince or out-argue or debate somebody into something. I mean, when's the last time somebody decided to jump into a debate with you about something and you actually changed your mind? No, most of the time you just hunker into what you already feel, right? But somebody can't argue with a story. So if I'm a collector of stories, if somebody's like, oh, I just don't have the money, then you would be a collector of stories of somebody else who didn't have the money, or it felt uncomfortable to them, and they figured out a way to get started anyway, and it paid off for them. So it'd be like, I don't have the money. That's too expensive. Yeah, I don't know about that. All I know is, so I would use my example, right? All I know is, before I got started in business, I had 3 maxed out credit cards and I was working on a 4th. And it didn't make any sense financially for me to get started or to invest in my skill set. But I also realized that if I didn't change, nothing was going to change. And if I continued down the path I was going to continue back down, I was just going to continue maxing out credit cards. And I'd been so good at wasting money on things that weren't rewarding me. What if I actually invested some money in something that might improve my skill sets, that might actually change my life? And that's where I got started. And so that doesn't mean they're going to say yes. That doesn't mean they're necessarily going to agree with you, but they can't argue with a story. So that's one example of overcoming an objection with a story. It's simply sharing somebody else's story that have done what it is the person's saying they can't because of their particular situation. Another way to look at that, and a lot of times when we work with people in our workshops, we talk about the closing of a talk. And so often in the closing of talk, you need to have two closes, right? Again, because of these two personality types, there are, if you're in a chat or you're here on Instagram, I'd love to know, would you identify yourself as an emotional decision maker, or you're one of those people that need all the fine print? You're the details, just the facts, ma'am, kind of decision maker. For me, I am absolutely, this is going to shock you, I'm an emotional decision maker. Right? I'm an emotional decision maker. Usually if you make me feel something, you map it out that it's going to be fun. There's a social aspect to it where you're going to get to go on a trip. There's a mastermind. There's something social. It seems fun. Or even like, here's a cause. I'm probably going to throw my credit card at you, more than likely. So that's just a heads up for those of you that are pitching me something later. But on the other hand, there are those people that they need to, and I used to look at these people as just very combative. Like they would know, well, is there a money back guarantee? How long exactly is this? What's the ins and outs in this? What happens if, and they play the if game a lot, right? The what if game. So they're trying to go through every scenario in the world in their head. And I used to get so frustrated with these people until I realized they needed different boxes checked than I did. So when we work with people in our workshop, we're going to go through and we're going to show them how to map out the technical close first. The technical close is going to make sure all those boxes for those people that need all the logistics, they're taken care of. But then we're always going to wrap up with an emotional close because, and I was just on a call yesterday with my friend Kristen, and she hosts events. And we were talking about this, that even the most analytical person is still an emotional decision maker. We are all emotional decision makers. We make a decision or a purchase or whatever, and even the analytical people, what they do is they make an emotional decision and then they justify it with analytics. They justify it with logic, but they still made an emotional decision, right? It's just the fact that they justify it. Those people that talk about, hey, I have no money, and then they go on some, they go to the mall and buy a pair of jeans. You're like, why'd you buy a pair of jeans? And their justification is, oh, well, I had a coupon that this and that, and it says I'm saving this. And like they still spent money they didn't have, but they justified it in their head that they had a coupon or that these things were normally this price, but now they're this price. Well, they still spent the amount of money, right? They had just logically justified it in their head. So we always end with some kind of emotional close. And one of the best ways to do that is if you're in business, right? If you're in business, think about what's the number one objection you get when somebody wouldn't do whatever it is you do. Why wouldn't they hire you? Why wouldn't they try your product? Why wouldn't they? And so usually it comes down to a few things. There's usually one that's like, I can do this myself, right? So maybe it's instead of hiring you as the expert, hiring you as the authority, they're like, well, I can probably do this myself, right? I'm going to save some time. I'm going to save some money. And they're probably not going to save time. They're trying to save money. They're like, I can do this myself, right? It's the objection of, I don't need you. I can probably do this myself. I can find the DIY people. Another objection that people pop up with a whole lot is like, I can wait. I can wait on this. Like it isn't urgent. So it's a take action situation, right? That they're like, well, this sounds great. I'm sure, but you know what? Just not the right time. I need to think about it. I need to talk to my spouse. I need to, have a Zen moment. Most people, when people say they need to think about it, it's not they really don't need. When's the last time you thought about something more and you got any more clarity on it? Usually you just need more information, right? So there's those two. Another objection is, well, I've always done it this way. So you've always done something a certain way. It may be what you're offering in your business or product or service is a new way to do something or a new way to look at something. And so that's another objection is, okay, well, I've always done it this way. This is how my family did it. This is how my mom did it, right? So these are a few different ways. I'll think of a few in a little bit. But what we want to do in those situations, so there's 3 objection examples. What we want to do in those situations is we need to come up with a story that overcomes that objection, right? And a lot of times those stories don't have anything to do with our actual, in fact, they're more effective if they have nothing to do with your product or service. So let's say you've given a presentation, you've done a 45-minute keynote, and you get to this portion, You want to find just a silly little anecdotal story that would overcome that. Specifically, let's think about like, what about hire an expert story versus, do it yourself story. For example, for 3 years, while I was not going to college or dropping out, I had the privilege of working at Disney World, the happiest place on earth. And I was so happy because before I ever started acting, what I wanted to be growing up, and I probably have a gajillion books over here of all my nerdy Disney stuff that I have here. I wanted to be an animator for Disney. And I ended up going to school as a musical theater major at the University of Oklahoma. But after my first semester at Oklahoma, I saw that Disney was interviewing for a college program that you could go work at Walt Disney World and get college credit. And I was like, yo, tell me more. And I went and I interviewed and I got a great job and I got to go work at Disney World and get college credit instead of going back to school like a good college kid. I stayed and I worked 3 years at Disney World. And one of my favorite things to do was work in the mornings at Rope Drop. So for those of you that haven't been to Disney World, each of the parks let you in a little bit. So I worked at the Disney, what's now the Disney Hollywood Studios. It was the Disney MGM Studios at the time. Same thing if you go to the Magic Kingdom or Disneyland, like they'll let you in the beginning, but they only let you like so far down Main Street and there's a rope. So people get there for what they call rope drop because they want to get there in the morning. There's like big fanfare, there's music, and I love being there. So I worked at a ride called the Great Movie Ride, and it looked exactly like the Chinese theater that's on Hollywood Boulevard in Hollywood. And it's a replica of Grauman's Chinese Theater. And we would be out front, but we could see where the rope drop was, and we'd see all these people and these kids push all the way up to the rope, right? And they're chomping at the bit to get in there. I mean, they're there early and they wait, and there's the fanfare, and then that magic moment, they would drop the rope. And we would all be there and we would always watch. And there were always two kinds of families. There was the one family that the minute they got there, they just took off. They were just like, boom, like banshees, just like bat out of hell, like just tear into the park. No plan, no anything, like just go. And then there were the families that would stop, collect themselves, walk over to the kiosk and grab a map and take a minute to look at the map, how things are laid out, what the normal wait times were, and they took a minute before they went off into the park. By the end of the night, me and every other cast member, we can tell you which families were which. Because the family that were all screaming at each other, exhausted, the kids were fussing, the parents were over it, everybody was wiped out, it was stressful, they were tired of another line, they were all griping at each other. Those were the people that just ran into the park with no plan. The other families would be the ones hugging, great, chill. 9 times out of 10, they would wait and save our ride for the very last ride. They would come up, how was your day so far? Oh, we hit this, we hit Star Tours. Then we went over to the Little Mermaid ride. Then it was great. We went over here to the Indiana Jones show. We were saving the Great Movie Ride for last. And because they had looked at their map and planned it out. I find in all of our lives, there are times that we think by going fast and doing it ourselves, we can probably save some time and money. But what we find out is if we take some time to stop, confer with an expert, confer with somebody that's already done it, it's going to be a little better. Like in that situation, some people only go to Disney World once in their entire lives. But the people that plan those maps and the cast members, we were there every day. And what I would do in that moment with a client is I use that story, something like that, for a financial advisor, for a real estate agent, for somebody like myself that talks storytelling. Because the way I would tie that into the end of the presentation is, hey, I find in a lot of our lives, we find that there are times that we think we can do something on our own faster and easier. But a lot of times it's something we only do once in our life. You may only write a talk once in your life. You may only try to come up with a story and a message to get impact once in your life. But I help people do it every day for the past 17 years. And then I would lead in my close. I did this exact same story and example with financial advisors. They do that all the time. A story like, now again, help them find their story, But if I was a financial advisor in that situation, where I would just go from there, would be like, I find in a lot of our lives, people think they can do this on their own. You may only come up with your retirement plan once in your life. I help people do it every day. And so it's a great way to use a story into a close. Another example would be like if somebody's always done something one way. They're like, well, this is the way I know it. My mom did it this way, and you can find a silly little story about like the way you, maybe it's something like how you always prep something for a certain meal, how you rinse noodles, or how you have always, maybe you're a gardener like my buddy Dave, and you've always, we always plant things this way. And then you find somebody else that did it a different way and it was actually better, right? So maybe you find an anecdotal story like that. And then that way you can help them see that just because you've done something one way your entire life doesn't make it the best way, doesn't make it the right way, right? It just means it's the way you know, and we understand that's comfortable. But if you're willing to step out of your comfort zone, I can help you do something better, have a different way of looking at that. And then lastly, we talked about maybe it's like, I'm going to think about this. I'm going to wait, right? It's this idea of, or what's my, is it worth it? What's my return on investment? And to those people, I always talk about it. A great anecdote from my friend Barry. She always says, instead of looking at ROI, right, where that's a return on your investment, that's that question of, is it worth it? Is it worth it to buy this fitness program? Is it worth it to buy this training? Is that mastermind worth it? Is whatever worth it? Sometimes you have to ask yourself, instead of what's the ROI, what's the COI? What's the cost of inactivity? So maybe you share a story about a time where you could have taken action and you waited and you wish you hadn't. That somehow it cost you more to wait on something than instead of the uncomfortable action of taking action initially, maybe an investment, maybe it's uncomfortable, whether it's an uncomfortable action, maybe it's an uncomfortable investment because money's tight. But if you can paint a picture and tell a story about a time that you either took action and it totally paid off, like you didn't want to, there was every reason and every excuse in the world. My friend Pat tells a story about going on vacation with his family in Florida. And they were there in Florida, and his daughter really wanted to see the sunrise. And he was like, okay, not realizing how early the sun comes up in Florida. And he talked about that alarm went off and that he just wanted to roll back over and get back into bed. But he forced himself out of bed and he met his daughter and they went out on the beach. And he talked about what a magical experience it was as he saw the sun burst out from over the horizon, and what an amazing moment he and his daughter got to have that he wouldn't have had to have if he put something off. And then he would do that same transition. I find a lot of times in our lives, we have the opportunity to take action on something, but it's uncomfortable. It would be really easy not to. But by taking action, getting uncomfortable, we're going to reap the benefits. We're going to experience blessings that we never would have had we put it off. And he would lead that into his close as well. So hopefully today, this has just been a few examples of ways that you can use stories instead of fighting and debating and facts versus facts and yes and no and ROI. Simply tell a story. Tell an anecdote of something that helps overcome the objection that you've gone on as well. We share these things every day in our 2-day workshop here in Dallas, a Well-Crafted Story Workshop. If you'd like to know more about some storytelling techniques, some ways that you can be a better communicator, connect with people, I'm just going to encourage you to go to storywellcrafted.com. Go to storywellcrafted.com and download our Well-Crafted Story Blueprint. What it is a PDF that goes straight to your phone. What it does is it maps out all the specific techniques you can use the next time you're about to tell a story or about to go live or be in front of a prospect. What that means is the next time you're in front of somebody, that potentially a relationship, a work situation, a prospect, a podcast, a webinar, a live stage, you go in with complete confidence that you know exactly which story you're going to tell, what the strategy is, and how you're going to get somebody to take action with you. So just go to storywellcrafted.com, get your Well-Crafted Story Blueprint, and then reach out. Anything that we can do to help, we're always here. We do live Q&As every Friday. Thank you for your time. My name is Coach Jimmy. Go to storywellcrafted.com and we'll be in touch real soon. Take care.